Welcome everybody to a wonderful video. I shouldn't say wonderful. Welcome to a Friday video. Today we're going to be talking about dating Chinese girls / dating Chinese women. I would like to go into a little bit of detail as to these kind of relationships, and the reason for this being that I lived in China for over a third of my life. The majority of my adult relationships were had with Chinese women. And on top of that, I have a huge amount of subscribers who reach out to me very often, asking me for advice and telling me their situations and all the trials and tribulations of their relationships. So I have a lot of experience to draw on here. I'm going to cover a couple of bullet points. And then after that, I'm going to open the floor to questions. And I'll be answering your super chats and a couple of normal chats too. And hopefully I can help you understand some of the big cultural differences when it comes to dating a mainland Chinese woman. Now, you'll find a lot of parallels between dating a mainland Chinese woman and somebody of Chinese ethnicity. So even if they grew up in the States or in Australia, something like that, they will still be held by the same traditional Chinese values, family values. And of course, other Asian cultures are quite similar too. So, if you maybe have a relationship with someone from Thailand or Vietnam, you'll find some parallels here. Anyway, I thought I'd start by talking about sort of the age of dating. What kind of time do people start dating in China? And it's a little different from the West. I found from my own experiences, people of my generation and older don't have time for dating when they're in middle school and high school. In China, you have this massive rush. Your entire life is focused on passing something called the Gaokao, which is the sort of university entrance exam. And there's a huge amount of competition in China to get these very limited spots in these big universities. And so it creates a huge amount of pressure on young people to pass. And it's no joke. Young children commit suicide over this. There's a hell of a lot of pressure on these people to pass the Gaokao and get a good spot in a university. So what happens is they have to focus all of their spare time and energy on study. And having taught the whole spectrum of people in China as my job for many years, like I started at kindergarten, taught middle school, taught high school, taught young adults, I got to see that even now it's still the same. Young children, even kindergarten children, they finish kindergarten and the first thing they do is go home, have a little something to eat, and then they go out for their extra lessons, be it piano or violin or extra math or calligraphy or whatever. And I'm talking about 4 or 5-year-old kids here. So there is no real time to date until you hit college / university. And it's kind of the opposite. I feel like in the West, high school and middle school are kind of a breeze, and when you hit university, that's when things get a little harder. That's when you start to have to really study. But it's the opposite in China. Middle school and high school are incredibly difficult, but once you hit university, that's when you get to relax. That's when people just kind of can turn up to class if they feel like it or not, but they're pretty much guaranteed to pass. And so this is when dating really starts. Now, that's all good and well, but there is one huge issue with dating in China, and that is the lack of sex education. It's still a very taboo subject in China, and it's not part of the curriculum. At least in South Africa when I was growing up, I think we had sex ed class in high school, but I must have been 13, about 13 years old when we had actual proper sex ed classes, and our biology teacher put up slides and told us all about it, and we learned all about different kinds of birth control and STDs and all that kind of thing, it's an important thing to know. So, this changes the whole dynamic when it comes to dating in China, because it very often leads to a much more innocent sort of a dating experience. You're dealing usually with people that are not exposed or have proper knowledge of sex and how it all works. So it can lead to some interesting situations. But on top of that, it's also very dangerous, because the lack of education and the lack of, especially when it comes to STDs and birth control and stuff, will lead to STDs and will lead to unwanted pregnancies very easily. Look, out of the expat friends I have in China, a number of them caught STDs. More than back home. You know, my friends who caught STDs back home, yeah, that's because they were being unsafe with random one-night stands or whatever. But in China, I found the percentage of people that I knew who actually got STDs were much higher. And of course, I'm not saying HIV, but I do know one guy who got HIV in China. But things like syphilis and the clap, various other, things which were kind of horrible. And unfortunately, being the guy who spoke Chinese, and this happened not only to me but to C-Milk as well, we've both got stories where we've had to help our friends go to the hospital and explain to the hospital what's wrong with them and be the translator in this very uncomfortable sort of a situation. Anyway, so the lack of sex education, like I said, does lead to some interesting situations. Now, I'm going to talk about something a little touchy here, which also is a big part of relationships in China, and that is abortion. There isn't this moral battle in China, which you find in most Western countries. You got pro-life, pro-choice kind of people butting it out. You've got Christianity and other religions getting involved and saying it's not okay to have abortions, etc. But in China, the state, the government actually still carries out forced abortions on people who are not supposed to give birth. So, up until recently, we had the one-child policy, and you weren't allowed to have more than one child. And on top of that, even now that they've relaxed it a bit, it's still just a two-child policy. Also, you're not supposed to have a child unless you're married. And so abortion is a very normal thing that everybody grew up with. Abortion is even used as a form of birth control in some of the more sort of rural situations, which is disgusting as far as I'm concerned, but that's just the way it is. And in fact, when you buy a pregnancy test in China, inside the pregnancy test box, you find advertisements for abortion clinics, just in case you test positive. I mean, look, it's a video that I should make all on its own. There's a huge amount of focus on abortion in China because, for instance, when you get married, you have this option of getting a blood test when you actually go get married to see if either parent has some kind of a disease that could cause genetic issues with your child. They do tests to see if the child has any kind of Down syndrome or anything like that. And then, 9 times out of 10, the child will get aborted if there is an issue. And it's just so common and so normal in China for abortions to happen that it can lead to some very heartbreaking situations in relationships. And I'm going to relate one of those, which didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend of mine. Well, I should say a subscriber, not a friend. I don't really know him. He sent me a bunch of emails. He's pretty distraught. A guy in the UK who fell in love with a Chinese woman who moved to the UK and was living there illegally. And he met her through her work, and they got together, started living together. She got pregnant, and then she used the baby as a bargaining chip and basically said, unless you help me buy a house in China, I'm going to have an abortion. And he couldn't afford it, and so she just went ahead and had an abortion as if it was just something normal. So I do want to warn anyone who's going to get into a relationship with a Chinese woman that when it comes to abortion, it's not a taboo subject. It's a very common, normal thing that will happen in China, and it is something that could lead to a heart-wrenching situation, and you might find yourself in a situation which is beyond your control. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there for you guys. All right, let's move on to actual dating because, I'm talking about some fairly deep stuff here, but let's talk about dating. Meeting women in China I found was very easy. And by easy, I mean, what would happen is you would basically be able to meet people through friends. That's obviously the best way to always do it. I found that the relationships people struck off by meeting girls in bars and so on were not good. Again, remember that China still has a very traditional sort of a family setup and it's a very traditional society. So the kind of girls that go to bars and clubs and hang out there are usually, they've broken past that, right? So they're free and open and they've been out there and they've done a lot. And you usually end up with the crazies. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's true. The majority of my friends who ended up meeting their girlfriends in bars and clubs always had the worst relationships. They were rocky and terrible, and they didn't come out very well. But meeting through friends and through language exchange or through work or whatever is the usual way that it happens in China. And you can very easily, get into a relationship. I found, obviously, being a foreigner, that getting into relationships was actually very, very quick and easy because you get a lot of attention. And of course, this is an unfair advantage that foreigners have in China. A very big unfair advantage, and it's not fair for the local guys. And I feel for them, because I'd very often be in a situation where I'd be the foreigner in the group, and I'd be invited out, and there'd be other Chinese guys with us, and I could tell they're interested in the girls, but all the girls were only interested in talking to me and only interested in me because I was so exotic. And made me feel really bad for those guys. And I never took advantage of it. That wasn't my deal. But the fact of the matter is that you are exotic in China if you're a foreigner, and more so than most places. Because don't forget, in China, they have been cut off from the rest of the world for so long. On top of that, the heavy censorship of Western media and so on. There are a lot of places still in China that have never seen foreigners. And I found that out firsthand, of course, traveling around on my motorcycle. I would turn up in a village somewhere in the countryside, and people would come out of their homes just to see this foreigner, and they'd be phoning their friends to come from the local villages nearby also to come see this foreigner and take photos with this strange alien. And it's still like that today, even though China's been open for such a long time. So the amount of attention you get in China leads to easy relationships. Because when you've got girls just approaching you, and guys too, I mean, it's not just girls find you attractive or whatever. You're a foreigner, so guys come to talk to you and want to take photos too. But because you've got this passive attention, it means you don't have to work very hard to meet people. You can be on a train and people will take a photo of you or come to ask to take a photo of you, and that's your in. Now you can ask them for a number or say, hey, do you want to go out and have a meal sometime, or whatever it is you want to do. And that can lead to an easy way into relationships. But bear in mind, you need to be able to speak the language. It's a huge, huge thing. Before you speak the language, it's difficult to get into it. And also, language barriers are one of the major issues that cause cultural misunderstandings and, of course, relationships to fail with mainland Chinese women. So I suggest that if you're going to think about having a relationship with a Chinese woman, you need to at least understand Chinese at a very basic level. Go take a little course, do an online thing, whatever you have to do, but at least try. So yeah, getting into a relationship is fairly straightforward. The next thing is, of course, what happens when you want to take someone out on a date? Well, the most common thing to do in China is to go to a restaurant. Going to see a movie or whatever, it's not really the same kind of deal. So what you'll end up doing for your first date is you usually go to a restaurant. And another weird little idiosyncrasy that I found was when I used to take a woman out for a date, they would very often, without asking me, invite their friends to come along as well, which I found really annoying. Because, and it makes sense, they obviously want their friend to be along to make sure that you're not going to try anything funny, or get their friends to help vet you, that kind of thing. So what would happen is I'd make an arrangement for a date, a certain place, and I'd meet them, and then they would come with, 1, 2, 3 friends, and I'd be like, great, And as the man, you're also expected to pay, because there's still a lot of traditional values, I should say. So you still have gender roles. It's not like in the West where everyone's supposed to be equal and divvy things up the same way. As the man, you will be expected to pay for the meal or whatever it is you guys are going to go and do. And it kind of sucks when suddenly you have to pay for not just 2 people, but 4, 5, 6 people. And this is a big cultural issue that I found. Another thing as well is dating in China is not cheap. I mean, the cost of living in China is cheap. No joke. You can, if you want to be a scumbag, you can live off 5 RMB lunch boxes, which is like $1 for a thing with some rice and some expired meat or whatever it is on top of it. You could do that if you want, but if you're going to take someone out on a date, especially down south, the way things happen is it's all about being opulent, right? It's kind of like you're Caligula or something. You got to go out there and put on this huge spread. So you walk into a restaurant, you sit down, and they don't expect you to order one dish for them and one dish for you, because remember, the way people eat in China is you share dishes. So what happens is you end up buying probably minimum 3, maximum like 5, 6, 7. You actually order a lot of dishes, but the thing is you want to order good stuff. So you go to a restaurant and you'll order like a roast chicken, you'll order duck, you'll order, these vegetables, that kind of meat, etc. And it can be fairly expensive, especially if you go to a nice place. And I made the mistake, especially when my language ability was very poor in the beginning, of asking the girl to order food, right? So they'll go like, oh, this is my chance now. And they'll be like, I want this, this, this. Order a bunch of 特色 specialties, which is usually stuff you're not going to want to eat anyway as a foreigner. It'll be something that's weird, but because it's a specialty, it's going to be expensive. And you end up with a massive bill. And in the beginning, when I was in China, I was poor. I was poor as dirt. And I remember getting in a situation where I took a girl out on a date and she ordered more than I had to my name in money. It was that bad. And I had to really like worm my way out of that, and got some friends to come bail me out. But I'll tell you one thing, you got to watch out for the price, because you're going to end up paying for it. And also, a lot of people make this mistake when they go to China. They think, oh, China's cheap, just go ape, do what you want, go and buy this, buy that. It's not going to be much, everything's cheap in China. That's not true. If you go to a restaurant and they've got like a specialty mushroom or a specialty fish or something like that, it can cost huge amounts of money. It can cost like hundreds of dollars, US dollars, for that one dish, because it's so special. And that's how Chinese people like to show off to their friends, is go to restaurants and order these exorbitantly expensive things to show that they have money. So just be careful. Don't go into a restaurant in China and think, it doesn't matter, order whatever, it's not going to cost too much, because sometimes it can cost way more than you would ever spend back home. So just a little warning there. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about gifts here for a minute. I had a couple of fairly heartbreaking situations when I would buy gifts. And, because I grew up in a situation, in Western society, when if you buy a gift for someone, even if they don't like it, they'll still say thanks, you buy them a necklace or something, and let's just say it looks like shit because you've got bad taste. They'll at least say, well, thank you very much, I really like it, something like that. They'll never wear it and probably throw it away or put it in the back of a drawer or something, but at least they won't to your face say they don't like it. But I found Chinese girls to be very pragmatic and very blunt. And a number of times I bought something which I thought looked nice and was expensive, etc., give it to them, and they're like, no, I don't like it, or no, you can just keep it, or that kind of thing. It happened to me a number of times, and I was not gonna lie, kind of hits you right there, and it's not very pleasant. So those are some of the basics. Now, I thought I would open this up to you guys, and I would like to read some of your super chats, and I would like to, this is a candid conversation, guys. I want us to talk about this. Any questions you may have, if I have the experience, I will share it with you. So let's see what some of you guys have to say. Again, I have no idea how the super chats work with this new streaming service thing, so it's kind of annoying. But let's see if I can just go all the way back up and see. Okay, so the first super chat that I see here says, Goeienacht from Madeira Island, Portugal. Oh, Goeienacht. Okay, that means good evening or good night in Afrikaans. Excellent. Next we have, hi, thank you very much from Akash Power. I'm looking for questions here, guys. I'd love to answer your questions. So let's see what we have. That's not a question. There we go. Off topic. Okay. All right. I'll get to these off topic things maybe later or in an upcoming video, but I really do want to answer questions for you guys. So please, I'm looking for questions about dating Chinese women. Okay, let's see. What is the chance, this is from Amy Lee, what is the chance of someone becoming vegan or being open-minded to veganism? No meat, eggs, dairy, honey in diet. This is a very tough one. No joke. The Chinese diet is not suited to any kind of fancy sort of ideas of diets. And that's simply because of the recent, situation they had with everyone starving to death. You don't get to choose what you eat when there's nothing to eat but random insects and bark and animals and whatever. You can't choose. And so China hasn't reached that point really where alternative diets are going to be a big thing. That being said, I know some vegans who lived in China, and it's not impossible. You just usually have to go to these sort of Buddhist temple restaurants, because Buddhism, of course, they have to be vegan or at least vegetarian. So you can find it. It's not impossible. But food is such a hugely important part of Chinese culture. And if you go back to somebody's hometown, for instance, if you are dating a Chinese man or a Chinese woman, and you go back to their family and the family prepares a meal for you, it's actually hugely insulting not to eat the food, even if you don't like it. So I found myself more than once in a situation where I was just eating the most disgusting food that I'd ever eaten in my life, for me, But I ate it anyway, just because you don't want them to lose face. It's a big part of the culture. That was a good question, though. Okay. Jennifer, thank you. Says, keep doing what you're doing. Say hi to Matt and have a beer on me. Absolutely. Let me know if you're in Scotland. Will do. Excellent. All right. Let's see. Do we have any more questions about dating Chinese women, guys? That's what this is all about. Let's hit it. Let's see. I'm going to dig through the usual chats here and see, is virginity a thing in China? Yes, absolutely. Virginity is a thing in China. I did date a virgin once in China. It is, you have to understand that there's a very heavy emphasis on family values in China, right? So basically, the young girl will be stuck into her studies until she reaches university, and then study university. Of course, I'm talking about urban people here. Study university, find someone to get married at a young age, and then have a child at a very young age. But of course, virginity is all about it. And don't forget, you still have things like arranged marriages and stuff, and that's used as a bargaining chip often in these arranged marriages between powerful families. And this is where you can find yourself out of odds as a foreigner, because the arranged marriage thing is still quite a big thing. And of course, families have to agree on the family that you're marrying into, etc., etc. And so you will very often find, as a foreigner, you fall in love with someone, they fall in love with you, you start to have a relationship, but the unfortunate thing is that they don't want their parents to know about you because you're a foreigner. And this can be very heartbreaking as well. It's happened to me, even my current wife, for the first part of our relationship. I say current wife as if I'm going to have another, which is not true, but my wife, who I love and adore and all that kind of stuff, even in the beginning of our relationship, she didn't want her friends and family to know about me, because it's so difficult, especially if you're from a traditional family in China, to convince your parents and your relatives and your grandparents and your family that it's okay to marry a foreigner or to date a foreigner. It's goes completely against the traditions, because they plan everything. Everything is so carefully planned when it comes to Chinese weddings and stuff. They choose specific days. The moon has to be in a certain place. The names have to kind of line up. They go and see fortune tellers and all sorts of things. It's a very involved process, and there's just no space in that whole process for foreigners. That's like, they don't even think that. So when someone says, "Hey, I'm dating a foreigner," it's almost always fought against, and you'll find yourself rejected and feeling rejected because your girlfriend doesn't want to tell her parents about you. But you have to also understand that for them to go to that step where they tell their parents that they're dating a foreigner is a huge leap of faith and a huge leap of courage, and they will only really do that if they're super serious about you and want to marry you. So just bear that in mind, at least from my own experience. All right, let's see if we got any other questions here. The Chinese diet is far more veg and little meat than the Western diet. I dated long distance and got married quickly. We've been together for 8 years now. Well, that's fantastic, mate. Yes, look, seriously though, I lost a lot of weight when I got to China, and that's because it's a different diet. There's no dairy, so you don't have cheese or butter in anything. Down south, there's a lot of rice. Up north, you still get a lot of noodles and bread, and so you won't lose weight as much, I don't think. But down south, where I was living, you usually eat a meal that consists of like a portion of white rice, bland white rice, and a little spattering of vegetables and a little bit of meat thrown in as well. Some pork usually. And it's definitely a healthier diet all around than a Western diet, and so you'll find yourself losing weight. But the meat's still there. It's still the most important part of the meal. Other than the rice, of course. Let's see. Elliot Denizen asks, has dating in China changed at all culturally recently? Love your videos. Just at the end when I was starting to leave China, I did notice younger people were starting to date more, high schoolers and stuff. Definitely not from my generation, though. So from that point of view, I saw a little bit of a change. And it did seem like things were opening up. But unfortunately now, I feel like it's actually going to be even more difficult to be accepted by the family and society simply because of the way the politics of the world are headed. Right, I have to be honest with you guys. It's the most ridiculous, stupid shit you've ever seen in your life. But right now, I've got friends living in Shanghai or in other parts of the country who've been told that foreigners are now bringing the disease back in, the Wuhan flu. They're bringing it back in, so you're not allowed to go anywhere. I know people who are students in China who have not been able to, since the breakout of this COVID-19 thing, leave their dorms. Right now in China, the idea is that if you are a foreigner, you are kind of out there. You are against China. You're bringing diseases in. You're against China. And the only way that they accept you is if you're some kind of an arse licker who goes around saying, oh, CCP's great, China's amazing, China's this and that. Then they'll tolerate you. But other than that, they look at you as if you're a problem. And so this is going to make it even harder for relationships as far as I'm concerned. Because you may fall in love, they may fall in love with you, but having society around them accept you is tough. I mean, it was even tough back when I started dating in 2006 in China. I would have situations where you're dating someone, they don't want to hold your hand in public because they feel embarrassed. They don't want to be labeled as a foreign whore or something like that, because they do. Like, my wife still gets comments all the time by the Wu Mao and stuff, labeling her all these disgusting things that they have. They've got special words that they call women who date foreigners, right? So they don't want to be labeled as that. And so even in public, they don't want to be affectionate. You wouldn't be able to give them a kiss or something like that. It's difficult. It's difficult. So I think it's actually going to get worse, to be honest. Hopefully not for long. All right. What do we have next? Do the current political tensions between China and the US affect women's views of American men? Yeah, well, I think I kind of just went through that now, but absolutely. Okay, next we have, any advice for navigating politics? I'm American, girlfriend Chinese. Real hot button for her. Yeah, look, this is tough. Like I said, because my parents-in-law came and visited me here in the US, I'm in the US at the moment, and they stayed here for about 3 months. They lived here, they got to see how it all works, they traveled around, we took them around, they got to meet the local people, the neighbors, all that kind of stuff. It changed their mind because they keep getting, especially the older generation, the Chinese boomer generation basically, they get all these kind of chain letters that get sent around WeChat with these ridiculous pictures and saying that places like America are basically burning down to the ground. It's so unsafe. It's terrible and all that. And so they contact my wife and tell her, hey, listen, we're actually really glad we came to stay with you. Otherwise, we'd be worried to death about you right now. When it comes to politics, talking with your Chinese girlfriend about politics, man, Chinese people are the most intolerant people in the world when it comes to politics. And it's just their upbringing. You cannot have a conversation about politics without them getting butthurt. Even if they are incredibly intelligent and open-minded, it's so built in that this knee-jerk butthurt reaction is just part of their being. I can have a proper intellectual conversation with a Chinese girl, but as soon as I say anything that goes against the Chinese narrative, the CCP narrative, immediately I'll get a defensive response. Rather than being able to discuss it, it'll be a defensive whataboutism, kind of pissed off response. And it's just something that you have to let them grow out of themselves, you know. And this has always been my approach when it comes to dealing with politics in a relationship, is don't try to force your own politics on someone else. I mean, just in general, in life, it's not good. The most obnoxious people in the world are those people out there on either side of the spectrum holding up signs saying, screw you, believe what I want you to believe, you know? That doesn't work with people. If you want to not be an obnoxious piece of shit, all you need to do is allow people to have their own beliefs. Of course, if you've got a massive belief clash, you shouldn't be with that person in the first place. But if you've got someone that you respect and love and they've got a belief that you don't agree in, it's fine. Just experience life together. And hopefully, through life experiences, they'll be able to change their mind. If you show them the correct way, or what you believe is the correct way, let them make up their own mind. You know, don't say you're bad because you believe this or you're this or that. And it really doesn't work with Chinese people because they get defensive over the smallest little thing, and it's not their fault. It's the result of education, constant brainwashing through TV programs, newspapers, all that. Remember, it's censored. There's no balanced media. You don't get left and right. You just get what the CCP says, and that's all.
Small interjection.
Yeah, exactly.
This does not pertain to Chinese people who spent a lot of time abroad.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry, I got an interjection from over there. Of course, Chinese people who spend a lot of time abroad, it's different. I'm talking about dating mainlanders here, but of course, they often carry that with them, you know, so just be prepared. If you're dating someone who's been in the States or in Australia or Canada or something for about 5 years, they're still going to have that knee-jerk reaction if you go against their politics. So dealing with politics, yeah, it's tough. And honestly, I found the best way to deal with this is to allow other Chinese people to talk to them about it. That's the only time they really listen, because part of this knee-jerk reaction, it's this mechanism that's been built in, is the propaganda in China says it's us versus them. Foreigners are always humiliating China, so, you know, it's our turn to shine, or it's the foreigner's fault, there's the foreigner that. So when a foreigner says something about Chinese culture or Chinese society or Chinese politics, immediately that whole like us versus them thing clicks in. But if you have a Chinese person who's lived abroad for a long time, maybe immigrated or part of a long lineage of Chinese people, ethnic Chinese who've lived overseas, if they say something contrary to what the CCP says, a Chinese person, even a staunchly nationalist Chinese person, is apt to take them seriously. Will actually look at them and think about it rather than dismiss it as an us versus them thing. So my advice to you, honestly, is to try and find other Chinese people who are on the same sort of path as you are and introduce them to your friend. Anyway, I spoke too long on that one. Sorry. Let me get back. Okay, going down. Don't want to miss any. So the new YouTube live streaming thing is terrible for comments. It doesn't even... It's really messing me up here. Anyway. Okay, Majestic Bean. I was friends with this family when I was 17. I had a crush on the girl, and when I confessed to her, she said she was in an arranged marriage. Everything seemed fine, but then she ended up ghosting me later. Oh, yeah. I mean, look. It is difficult, and at the same time, you cannot presume to put your Western values onto... the Chinese cultural values. You cannot expect that your values are going to be respected, over their own. Because when you grow up and that's how you grew up, it's just like if someone came to you and asked you to give 20 cows as a bride price, you'd probably be like, what are you talking about? It's like something that's not easy to accept. It is difficult, especially if you're overseas, to break into a relationship with a Chinese person. Because I find I found it in South Africa and I find it in the US, the Chinese communities kind of stay together as a little clique, right? And if you try to date a Chinese girl or a Chinese guy, you're probably going to get a lot more resistance overseas as you would in China. And that's simply because you've got so many Chinese people there and you're so exotic and you're in their hometown and you're their home turf. So it seems safer for them. So just bear that in mind as well. Anyway, sorry to hear about that happening to you. Okay. What's your opinion on TikTok and WeChat getting banned? Will it affect Chinese folks in the States? my opinion on TikTok and WeChat getting banned is I really wish they would be banned. I know that in America you can't just ban stuff though. It's being thrown around as if they can just do that, but you can't. You know, it's against the Constitution or whatever to do things. What they can do is they can prevent government agencies from using it and stuff, and maybe prevent certain things and kind of force it out, but it can't be just like, hey, you can't use it. I know that WeChat is the primary way that all Chinese people that I know communicate with their families back home, read the news. They don't read local news when they're here in the States or whatever. Most of the people I know, they read, you know, the CCP news that comes out through WeChat. It is a very important communications tool. Well, I mean, my wife speaks to her parents daily through WeChat, sort of FaceTime calls and things. It is a very important thing. I don't see it getting banned though. I think that it's been worded wrong. It's not like they're just going to block it like in China. Dude, in China, if they want to ban something, they ban it. And there isn't a process. It's literally like, I remember when Facebook got banned. It was one day it was there, next day it wasn't. YouTube got banned. One day it was there, next day it wasn't. Instagram, one day it was there. You know, they literally ban it. Here in America, it's a long, drawn-out process, you know, and people get to discuss it, and it goes to court, and it does this and that. And at the end of the day, concessions are made, and you can still use it. They're not going to block off the ports and stuff so you can't actually access it. It just, maybe you won't be able to link it to your American bank account or something. I don't know. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think it's going to stay. Okay, next. Elving Lara. In terms of dating prospects and preferences, are the differences between the urban and rural women the same? They were when you first moved to China? You know, I'll be totally honest with you. In the rural areas, the majority of young women will move out of the rural areas to the big cities. That's why a city like Shenzhen, where I used to live, when I first got there, there were 7 women to 1 man. And everyone's always like, oh, China's got a gender imbalance. There's a shortage of women. I mean, yes, there is, but only in the countryside. In the big cities, it's usually 50-50, or in some cases, like when I first got to China, more women than men. And that's because if you're a young, attractive woman, you will go to the big urban centers to seek your fortune. That's where you will go to find a high-paying job. You can be an office worker. You can work in the entertainment industry, you know, in the service industry as a waitress or a hostess or whatever it is that you can do. And it's also a way for you to find a rich husband, because that's where they are. You don't find the rich husbands in the rural area. You find them in the city. And the families encourage this. They want their daughters to go to Shenzhen or Shanghai or wherever it is, see if they can, you know, make a fortune, because that money ends up going back to the family anyway, you know. And that's another thing you'll learn about dating Chinese women, is you will be, you know, unless you're lucky like me anyway, you will still end up sending money back to the family or footing the bill for a lot of things, or footing the bill, I should say. And, you know, her money will be being sent back to help family. And it's a big part of the big family system. So you have to make sure you understand how family works in the family unit in China before you decide to get very serious, because it becomes a part of your life and it's not going to go away, you know. So yeah, anyway. Mike Oxlong, love the videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, guys. Let's do 1 or 2 more, and then we're gonna have to call it a day, because, you know, this is just supposed to be a small one. And I was hoping we could do these more candid chats from time to time. Not make it very often, but from time to time. I prefer to do this in a live setting where we can just talk. So do we have another question coming through? Or I hope I didn't miss anyone. If I did, I do apologize, because this system is not very good. And I will make sure that I figure out where all the questions went, and then I will actually... you know, I'll find a way to reply to them in upcoming videos anyway. All right, do we have any more questions here? Yes, no? No? Maybe there's a look in the normal chat here. Someone asked, how am I doing with the fires in SoCal? It's fine, you know, they've got it under control. I know it's a big thing, but, you know, the systems work here. We get alerts, and the firefighters are out there doing their job, and the electricity's still on. Okay, let's see. Right. I guess that's it. Unless somebody's going to throw me a question, I'm going to just finish this off. again, I want to say thank you very much. I did not make this topic to try and denigrate anybody. I just wanted to share my experiences and the reason. I'm also not trying to brag or anything like that. Please, that's the last thing I want to do. I'm actually not that kind of person at all. And at least compared to the majority of other expats that I know in China, I actually did not have very many relationships. And the majority of my relationships are actually very long-term ones. This is just my personality. I'm more like that, you know. It's not to say I didn't have a lot of experience, but you know, that's what happens when you're in your 20s and so on, and 20s and early 30s. And you know, I did have a failed marriage, and I have now a very successful marriage. So I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot when it comes to cross-cultural dating. And so I was just hoping I could help some of you who perhaps are struggling dating somebody or are married to someone and don't really understand. And I hope I managed to answer some questions. I mean, if not, we'll pick this up next time. Anyway, guys, it is Friday. It is time to go crack open a beer or have a whiskey or whatever it is you do. Or if you're a teetotaler, it's time to just relax and do whatever you want to prepare for the weekend. I hope you're all having a wonderful time. I absolutely can't wait to see you in the next one. So until then, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome. And now let me figure out how to turn this off without cutting myself off. And yes.